In 1995, Nintendo dropped a console that can be considered both an incredible flop and simultaneously incredibly ahead of its time. And that console is the Virtual Boy. The Virtual Boy used cartridges for its games, had a very unique but oddly comfortable controller, and even had the intention of connecting multiple of these systems together using the extension port on the bottom to allow for multiplayer games. But ultimately none of that actually mattered because the Virtual Boy was a complete and utter commercial failure. To give you an idea of how much of a failure the Virtual Boy actually was, the console that it was sort of pseudo following up was the original Game Boy. And the Game Boy and its younger brother, the Game Boy Color, together sold almost 120 million units. The Virtual Boy, less than 1 million. Hell, if you want the easiest way to tell, just look at this thing's dates. It was released in Japan in July of 1995 and discontinued in December of 1995. That's 5 months. I think it's safe to say that if Nintendo decided to give up the ghost on this console after just 5 months, people didn't want it. It only fared slightly better here in the States, where it released in August of 95 and managed to last until August of 96, before they decided to just wash their hands of it and move on to the next thing. And it's pretty easy to see why people didn't really want it. It's designed to be like goggles, but it was too heavy to be able to strap it to your head without causing neck pain. So in order to play it, you had to have it set up on a table and lean into it to be able to actually see what you're doing. Color LCD screens at the time were both incredibly expensive and also crap. So in order to get around this and not make this console prohibitively expensive, they used a strip of red LEDs and mirrors and able to make this console work. I'm not well versed enough to fully explain how this thing works, so I'm going to leave a link down below to a video by the James channel. He did a great job explaining how this hardware works and showing some of the intricacies of what goes on inside of it. I'll link that down below so you can go watch it. The battery life on this thing was frankly terrible, especially when compared to the Game Boy. The DMG Game Boy used 4 AA batteries and boasted a battery life upwards of 30 hours on just one set of batteries, whereas the Virtual Boy required 6 AA batteries and chewed through those things in a mere 4 hours. Luckily, there was another power option, so you didn't have to use the batteries. The system itself came with the battery pack, which attached to the back of the controller, but you could buy a wall plug adapter for it. This attaches to the controller where the battery pack would attach and allows you to use a Super Nintendo power supply to power the system, which is handy since you have to use this thing on a table, so it's not exactly portable. Being able to play it and not chew through batteries is a nice addition. And let's not forget that the red and black stereoscopic images that the Virtual Boy produced, reportedly giving a lot of the people who played it severe headaches. Needless to say, there's a lot of reasons people decided that they did not like the Virtual Boy. And that's such a shame because I feel like there was so much potential for a console like this that it wasn't able to realize because it hit the market about 10 or 15 years too early. The Virtual Boy was able to give you this sort of 3D effect because it created a stereoscopic image. I mentioned it briefly before, but for anyone who doesn't know what a stereoscopic image is, stereoscopic imagery is where you take an image of the same thing from 2 slightly different points of view, and it allows you to better understand the depth of the object. It's actually how our body works to perceive depth. We have 2 eyes, so we are able to see an object from 2 very slightly different viewpoints, which allows us to almost see around it and understand its depth. That's what the Virtual Boy produced, because each of the red LED strips produced a slightly different image and allowed you to sort of see in 3D, or at the very least you could perceive the depth that they were trying to portray in the games. Mario Clash is a good example of this whenever you're bouncing back and forth between the foreground and the background. As is the Wario Land game that released on the Virtual Boy. The idea of 3D gaming was toyed around with in the mid to late 2000s, but it really didn't hit its stride until Nintendo actually released the 3DS in 2011. Another way that the Virtual Boy was ahead of its time was with a game like Teleroboxer, which tries to be a bit more immersive by putting you in the eyes of the character that you're playing. While this isn't the first go at a first-person game, this is one of the earliest games that I'm aware of where not only the game is the literal only thing that you can see because of how you wear the Virtual Boy to play the games, but it's also where it actually gives you this individual control of limbs to have this more immersive experience and feel like you are actually this character. This level and style of immersion in games is not something that we would really see have commercial success again until the Oculus Rift in 2013, almost 18 years later. So I don't know. I can recognize the Virtual Boy as a failure. I can understand why it failed, and I can recognize that with what it is, it honestly should have failed. But that's honestly kind of sad because there were several ideas that the Virtual Boy tried to pioneer that became such a commercial success a decade and a half later. It makes me wonder just what the state of gaming would be today had the Virtual Boy managed to stick the landing back in the 90s. How different would things be today if stereoscopic imagery had become a thing in the 90s rather than in the early 2010s? So what about you guys? Have you had experience with the Virtual Boy? What are your opinions on it? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. But I think that's going to be it for me for this one. If you like the video, make sure to hit that like button. And if you like what I do here, then hit subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I want to thank you guys so much for being here, and I look forward to bringing you even more videos just like this one as the days go on. So again, thank you guys for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one, y'all.